Home is where the heart is. It's our most valuable possession and the one place where we should feel safe. So what happens when it comes under threat?
It's like a volcano coming out of the toilet.
Everything that was in there, I lost.
And when disasters devastate not just your home, but your life.
If I'd have been in this kitchen when that had hit, I'd have been dead.
All of a sudden, I felt unsafe.
Coming up, a sea of sewage brings devastation to one property.
You used to dread coming home, and that's a terrible thing to do.
A beloved family home is ruined by a runaway builder.
The guts and the soul of the house have been ripped out.
And one man fights to protect his house from crashing cars.
It was a catastrophic accident with probably death, killing us.
Imagine you've bought your perfect starter home on the outskirts of London. So what happens when a tidal wave of raw sewage and industrial chemicals surges down the street, causing mass evacuation?
It had rats, it had tampons, it had all sorts of stuff in it.
Anything you flushed down the loo was going down the road.
You could imagine was in there.
And the nightmare flood returns year after year after year.
The road got dubbed Pooh Mews.
"23 years ago, hospital manager Paul Seymour and midwife Joanne bought their first house together. It cost £160,000.
We thought we could do it right from scratch and do what we like with it, which we do. So, you know, pulled it to pieces and put things up.
We thought we'd live in it maybe 10 years or so. We didn't expect to spend 20 odd years in it, really.
Then one evening in November 1998, something happened that would have a huge impact on the rest of their lives.
We were actually both in bed, it was asleep, and you suddenly heard all this noise going on, this commotion outside, and you're thinking, what's going on? Looked out the window, not that we could see much, all you could see was loads and loads of lorries.
There was this huge bang, followed by a rushing sound. It sounded just like we had Niagara Falls outside. There was this constant noise.
The couple rushed outside to find out what was going on.
It turned out that the manhole cover here the manhole cover was down the road somewhere. The whole sewage was just flooding out and down the road.
It was just like a tidal wave coming down the road. There were lights everywhere, orange lights, blue lights. You even hear screaming, which we realise now was the people inside the houses waking up to find sewage flowing through the house.
Yeah. It was so high that it actually got into some of the cars, hadn't they, the sewerage.
The water had burst out of a drain right outside Paul and Joanne's house.
It almost bounced off our wall and then just flooded down the road. So it just about missed us. We were lucky it missed us, but then it caught the rest of the 10 houses down the road.
Yeah.
I mean, really high.
When they took a closer look at the floodwater, they were shocked at what they saw.
Feces, there was toilet roll, there was all sorts of things.
Let's be honest, it had rats, it had tampons, it had all sorts of stuff in it.
Anything you flushed down the loo was going down the road.
You could imagine was in there.
Smell.
And the smell was there forever.
Yeah, it took a long time for that smell.
It took years, literally years, for the smell to disappear.
But they didn't realise there was something even more deadly lurking in the stinking water.
We knew there was sewage because you could smell it. What we didn't know at that stage was that there was also chemicals involved. There's an industrial estate opposite, and they had all sorts of chemicals.
It got into the system somehow,
Somehow it got into the system, which it was never designed to handle.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the excrement, but obviously all those chemicals that seep through, they got onto all the possessions, all the clothing.
10 houses in the street were immediately evacuated.
They just literally had to just go in what they were standing in, and they weren't allowed back in the houses, and everything they had was condemned.
The owners of the 10 properties were later paid the market value for their uninhabitable homes. But thanks to Paul and Joanne's wall, the floodwater didn't reach their property, so they could stay put.
When it first happened, we were almost elated. We thought we've obviously not had the problems that the other people had. It was very peaceful and quiet.
But the couple's relief didn't last long. The putrid flood was to become a recurring event in their lives and spur Paul on to take militant action. You've moved into the perfect home for raising your family. So how would you feel if it became a dripping and potentially hazardous nightmare?
When it rains, especially when the rain hits this corner, it's like a waterfall coming in.
That room is just now a liability.
Nursery nurse Kaylee and restaurant manager Carl moved into their 3-bedroom house in Gilfac Goch, South Wales 4 years ago. And from the start, they loved the unusual layout.
The kitchen and conservatory is an extension of the house, which was here when we moved in.
Where I'm stood at the moment, this is actually the kitchen underneath my feet. We've got a conservatory on top of our kitchen, which goes level with the garden.
We were quite surprised when we first seen it, but thought it's nice because it's different.
But it wasn't long before their problems began.
Within 6 months of us being here, so the furniture we had in this room started to gather mould. You could see there was damp patches, especially around the legs of the bed. You could see where it had been in contact with water, so obviously water was getting in.
With the typically wet and windy Welsh weather not helping, it wasn't long before the damp started to spread to the rest of the house.
We started noticing damp around the windows. It was thick black mould, and you could smell it as soon as you walked through the front door because it was so bad. So we had a builder out to see if they could give us some advice. They suggested it might be a problem in the attic. When they looked up in the attic, all the insulation was dripping wet.
The worn roof felt needed replacing, but that was just one area the water had come in. On pulling up the floorboards in the conservatory, the builder discovered it had been leaking down into the kitchen.
There was water filled in between the beams and the insulation was dripping wet.
The builder proposed a drastic and expensive solution. It was going to cost them £3,000.
We actually had the conservatory taken down, all the floorboards replaced, all the wooden beams replaced, and the kitchen ceiling replaced. And then we had the felt in the attic done. Then we had all the windows and doors replaced on the front of the house. So we thought that problem was fixed.
Their dream home just couldn't stand up to the elements, no matter how many times they tried to have it fixed. In total, the couple faced a huge repair bill of £7,500, which they managed to scrape together. But they didn't realise that having forked out all that money to fix the problem, the damp nightmare would return. And this time, it was out of control.
It's quite soul destroying. You know, it's just becoming a hindrance for us. It's borderline a disaster.
You've lived many happy decades in the house you built with your own hands. So what happens when Mother Nature unleashes her power?
I've never seen rain like it.
The water rose very quickly,
Yeah.
frighteningly so.
It was sheer panic, wasn't it?
And robs you of everything you hold dear.
We lost everything.
Retired photocopier engineer Brian and former police matron Irene Staines are Canvey Islanders through and through.
I've lived on Canvey since 1947. I moved there when I was 2 years old. I lived with my parents until I got married. That was the age of 21, when I moved into the house that Brian and I built at weekends while we were engaged.
The house means more to us than I think we can explain, because we've actually built it ourselves.
I just can't imagine living anywhere else.
Their Essex love nest was the first house built on the street. They ploughed everything they had into building their perfect home. They even built the house next door, which they sold on. It's been home to David and Tracy Fisher for the past 8 years.
We live next door to Brian and Irene. They're lovely neighbours.
They are lovely
They
neighbours.
are lovely neighbours. Ever since we've lived here.
Very helpful, always been very helpful.
Yeah, they have. We've done a lot of tears together and...
Quite a few bottles of wine.
quite a few bottles of wine, yeah.
But in August 2 years ago, the friends were about to have their lives and homes ripped apart as Canvey Island experienced the worst flooding since 1953.
We were at home and the rain was very heavy and we could see that there was a problem building up because normally the front of our front garden flooded a bit in heavy rain. When the back garden started to flood and we could see it coming in from the back road, we knew that there was trouble.
The unseasonal rainstorm developed into a flash flood, with torrents of water surging down streets, cutting off houses and devastating homes.
I couldn't see the road at all. From the top to the bottom, there was no road.
It was absolutely devastating.
That night, there were over 300 calls to fire and rescue across the county, with Canvey Island taking a huge hit. Brian and Irene's house was one of the worst affected.
Our original kitchen.
And the wood floor, look, and the washing up bowl floating.
Look at the colour of that water. There.
Quite raw, really, looking at it, isn't it?
It is. I can almost smell that water now.
Yes.
That's how bad it was.
To see my home destroyed was a terrible shock, and I couldn't see light at the end of the tunnel.
Their beautiful home was destroyed, with a staggering £82,000 worth of damage. Brian and Irene had to start all over. It would take years to be able to make it water and damp proof again. They were homeless and forced to spend 6 months in their caravan. Fortunately, the insurance company paid out for repairs.
We moved back into the house in March 2014.
And we decided that between us and our next door neighbours who also got flooded, that we would have a big party.
But the celebrations were short-lived. Just as they got their home back in order, it happened all over again. In Essex, one man's beloved home has become a crash zone for local motorists.
Look at the speed they come down here, look.
After 2 decades of smashes and near misses, he's been driven to desperate measures to protect his own home.
This is my buyers, 5 steel bollards, 6 concrete bollards, a double gate, and a wall about 8 inches thick. When the winter comes, we feel all the time that a car will crash in and kill us in our bedroom.
Owen Allen emigrated here with his wife in the mid-1960s to work for the NHS.
We moved to Braintree when I was about 22 years old, and we've been in this bungalow for about 35 years.
This was the perfect place for them, somewhere they could see themselves living for the rest of their lives.
We were living before in a 3-story house, and we decided to get off these stairs, and we decided to come and buy a bungalow to retire.
The home Owen chose was built on a spacious corner plot, set back from the road but right in the path of trouble. 20 years ago, a car span off the road, knocking down Owen's garden wall.
When we first moved into our bungalow, we didn't expect that this sort of thing was going to happen. We did feel safe. We didn't feel vulnerable. But you see, after a few years, cars started crashing into our property in succession. We obviously started feeling vulnerable.
A terrifying trend had begun. Over the course of 2 decades, a dozen cars crashed into their property. He's had clips to his wall, damage to his trees, and a broken gate.
This one was in 2012 when 2 vehicles crashed in during the same 2 weeks.
Fearing for their safety, Owen took matters into his own hands, erecting a concrete blockade to protect his boundaries.
First, at the beginning, there was only a double gate. Sometimes I put my car in there, but I couldn't because they kept crashing in. So eventually, I had to put 4 concrete bollards there. It was very hard work. I did it all on my own. The bollards which I have established gave me a bit more confidence that if anybody ran into it, they won't get through into my property and hurt me in my house.
But little did he know that the unlucky 13th and mother of all crashes was just round the corner. In South Wales, having already paid out £7,500 to repair damage from leaks in their upstairs conservatory, which had ruined their house, Kaylee and Carl Dudding and their 2 kids were about to relive the nightmare all over again.
After about a year or so, we realised that the problems weren't over. We noticed a black damp patch in the kitchen. Obviously, the leak had come back. So we went up there and we had to pull it all apart again. When that was ripped up, it was the exact same thing. There was a lot of stagnant water and all the insulation was dripping wet again.
But this time, there was an additional hazard.
Underneath the kitchen cupboard, in the corner of the kitchen, there's a plug socket. That started getting wet. We didn't realise this until our electric kept tripping out.
They called out an electrician who covered the socket and warned the couple that the house wasn't safe to live in.
We thought that this is serious now. It's not just a bit of water leaking in, it's actually potentially very dangerous for us. So we had a builder to come in and have a look at the conservatory again. He found where the leak was coming from and he told us that he would contact us within a couple of months to come back and do the work. And he never contacted us again. We never heard from him again.
Kaylee and Carl had nowhere else to go and no money left for major repairs to their battered home. And as the builder had pulled away part of the kitchen ceiling to find the leak, they had to find ways to protect their house against the elements.
We've put plastic sheeting around this corner because this is the worst place where the water comes in. So we have put plastic sheeting around that to see if we can try and stop it that way, but everything we try just doesn't seem to work.
For almost 3 years, the conservatory, which they plan to use as a playroom for sons Matthew and Caleb, has been a damp and partly flawless dumping ground.
There's about 4, maybe even 5 holes around the outside of the conservatory where water is actually able to come into the conservatory.
Every time we have rain, which living in Wales is a bit frequent, they have to go up there and they have to mop that floor.
If we don't keep on top of it, it will seep back into the kitchen and start dripping onto the units again, and it will find a way to get back to the electrics, and that's what worries me.
Sadly, for this young family, there is no easy solution to the conservatory leak problem in sight.
It's just confusing. You get so many different experts in their trade
that
tell you different things and do different things, but yet the same problem persists.
We've had another builder up who has basically advised us to start again and just take the whole thing down. But because we've already spent out so much money on the house, we can't really afford to do that right now.
The stress of the situation is taking its toll on Kaylee.
Every morning you get up and it's a drain. I do feel guilty about letting my children live here with the damp problems, but we haven't got anywhere else to go, so we're stuck in this situation until we can sort it.
The family are faced with the daunting prospect of never being able to get their family home back to the way it was. You've planned a long-awaited renovation to your beautiful family home. So how would you feel if you put your trust in a builder who left your dream in ruins?
The guts and the soul of the house had been ripped out, and you were just left with a bare shell.
All this needs to be ripped out and redone again, definitely. Shouldn't have been left like that. It's criminal.
driving instructor Darryl Gray and his family have lived in their distinctive 2-bedroom property for over 20 years.
The house was an 1880s built property.
Farmer's cottage.
Farmer's cottage, yeah.
Farm labourers. It's still got a lot of its quirks and features.
Got lots of sort of character, hidden character. We do love this house.
You're right there.
When Joe inherited some money 2 years ago, the couple decided to plough it all into their beloved home, redesigning the living space, adding 3 extra bedrooms and moving the bathroom upstairs. And as the neighbours had a builder in, they got a quote from him.
The builder was a very likeable guy. He was very easygoing and trustworthy sort of guy. He ticked all the right boxes and said all the right things. And we thought, well, we'll see what he says.
With the builder agreeing to take care of planning permission for them, they agreed a time frame of 10 weeks with a fee of £55,000 to include all work, materials and fees. And in August, the work began.
It seemed to be going on schedule. It seemed to be
There was a lot of flurry, wasn't there? A lot of activity
a lot of people moving around.
A lot of things being taken out and...
The demolition side of it went
really well.
Pretty quick.
But with the inside of their home reduced to piles of rubble and the work going very slowly, Darryl and Joe started to get worried.
The workers weren't coming in and staying all day, every day. You know, you'd start finding that they would come in on a Tuesday instead of the Monday, and that they'd leave at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and the time that they were working just gently started reducing over time.
By week 12 of the proposed 10-week job, work had slacked off so much it had almost ground to a halt, and the family were left to spend Christmas in what was nothing less than a death trap.
We'd had a rough Christmas because no lighting, no heating.
The roof hadn't been finished, so we were having water
pouring in,
run through through the roof.
He'd taken out all our old cooker and our oven, so we cooked on the open fire. That was our Christmas.
But there was good reason the tradesmen weren't keen to keep working. They hadn't been paid.
They'd been told that we hadn't paid the builder, and that's why he didn't have the money to pay them. So they naturally turned to us to ask, why that hadn't happened and to ask for their money.
And there was another nasty shock around the corner. The planning office called to say they didn't have permission to make any of the changes.
We had to deal with getting planning permission. You work yourself up and think, well, how are we going to put this right?
It's difficult to manage emotionally and every other which way, but you have to find a way of managing it.
Having already paid the builder to sort this out, the Greys were forced to employ an architect, submit new plans, and pay again for the application to be processed. The builder was proving elusive, but after 2 months, the Greys finally managed to track him down.
Around, I suppose, February time, confronted him. Said, look, you've got to sit down because I've had enough of this. And that's when he confessed to having financial problems.
So at that time, we were still trying to help support him so that we could get the work done.
But despite their concession, things were about to take a turn for the worse. In September, over a year after the job began, the builder disappeared completely. In Erith, Paul and Joanne Seymour's street had been flooded with raw sewage mixed with chemicals from the nearby industrial estate.
The road got dubbed Poo Mews, so everybody knew where Poo Mews was in Erith. They knew the road where the sewage flowed down.
10 contaminated houses had to be evacuated and condemned. The clear-up operation started immediately, costing £2 million and took several years, bringing chaos to Paul and Joanne's life.
Okay, no notification, nothing. They started digging up the road, so we had holes, we had blockages, we had noise. They didn't seem to mind doing this at 6 o'clock in the morning or late at night.
The whole process had a very disturbing effect on the couple.
I suppose I felt ill, is the honest answer. For the best part of 2 years, I never had any real quality of life unless I was out of this road. And you used to dread coming home, and that's a terrible thing.
At the time, midwife Joanne was working a lot of night shifts at the hospital.
She needed to sleep during the day, and of course, we couldn't. So basically, I couldn't sleep, she couldn't sleep.
Paul tried to talk to the construction company and the water board to make the work less invasive to their lives, but it fell on deaf ears. So he decided a militant campaign was called for.
I wanted to disrupt, I didn't want to stop the work because we wanted the work done, but I wanted it done on my terms and not on theirs. So I had the balaclava on and I just stood there, sort of nonchalantly just looked at them with my eyes poking out, and they just stared at me.
It was like Mexican standoff. There were camera crews outside.
Paul's day of action got a lot of media attention, and as work had been held up for 24 hours, the water company finally sat up and took notice.
The first thing he did say was that they would consider an aspect of compensation. At least a dialogue had been opened. So I decided that I would stand down with my action.
Paul and Joanne were awarded £3,500 compensation, but over the next 8 years, they were to see the return of the sewage flooding their street on 5 more occasions.
Oh, well, I thought it was all going to be done and dusted and that was the end of it, and hooray, you know, we could put our house back on the market and everything would be all right. And then we have another flood and another flood. And they claim they've sorted it out, and then we have another flood.
Then, 2 years ago, there were 2 more floods. It came as a complete shock to one new resident.
The drains were overflowing, so I thought that's a bit odd. And then my daughter started screaming because the water started rushing down the road, and it just all started coming in, and it was getting higher. The kids were absolutely petrified. It was horrible.
The few of us that have been here for that time, we know there's going to be a storm. Make sure you move your car up the road because it's likely to flood, whereas they don't realise, and I think to them it's a shock when it happens.
Thames Water were fined £250,000 for their part in the original disastrous sewage overflow. They say they are significantly upgrading their pumping stations, which pump waste from the properties to their sewage works, and have also thoroughly cleaned their network of pipes to reduce the risk of any further blockages. But Paul and Joanne have become so down with the situation, they just want out.
We can't sell the house. I think to try and sell the house, because people know what's happened, we certainly wouldn't get the price we should get for it.
We now treat it as a place to stay, not a home anymore. It's nothing more than that now.
Darryl and Joe Gray had grand plans of restoring their Victorian farm cottage to its former glory. Very little work had been done since hiring the builder, and all that had was substandard. And to add to their horror, the builder had completely disappeared, with £55,000 of their money.
Over one weekend, just cut off all his phones.
We couldn't get hold of him. He'd promised to come in on the Monday, and that was on the Sunday. And there was...
His home address had changed. You know, there's nobody at his home address.
Couldn't get through on the phone. That number didn't exist anymore. So that was the real, okay, this is what we're facing. The realisation that we might have been caught out by somebody who'd taken our money and not done what they promised puts tremendous strain on you as a person, because you start to doubt your ability to make good decisions, because you seem to have made such a whoppingly bad decision.
Darryl and Joe did some investigating and found they weren't the only ones duped by the builder. Others who were taken in included professional tradesmen.
Still owes me money. Yeah, and when I found out that he's done this to more than one person now, from what I can make out, he's got a list of people after him.
It's not the first people then.
No.
So, what we're going to need is some kind of second skin in the back here, buddy. If you know somebody who can help us out with that.
Yeah, you can see daylight up through there.
Yeah, it's pretty poor work, isn't it?
Shouldn't have been left like that. It's criminal.
The police advised Darryl and Joe that the incident could not be treated as a criminal matter, but a civil one. And since a civil prosecution could cost them thousands of pounds, with no guarantee of recovering their money, they're not going ahead. They can't afford to.
It's very frustrating. You know, I have patches where I feel really quite let down, really angry. And even times where I sit there and I think, you know, really, I've been a bit stupid to trust this guy.
What they were left with was an absolute scene of devastation. No walls in any of the bedrooms, no plastering, no heating, no electrical points. With a shell of a home and their money spent, the Greys only had one option: to try and build it back up themselves. All of which has had a knock-on effect on Daryl's driving school business.
I find myself having to take money out of the business to fund the house, the property. It's having an impact, obviously, on the number of hours I can work, so it's reducing the income into the household.
What should have been an exciting future in their newly extended home is now a considerably poorer one.
Our future, it's been dramatically altered, really. I mean, it's...
Yes, how long the house will take, we don't know, but we have to make the best of a difficult situation.
Back on Canvey Island, the dream house that Brian and Irene built back in the 60s had been destroyed by a force of nature no one could ever have predicted.
I don't know how I could describe to people what it's like to look at your home underwater like that.
11 months and £82,000 later, the damage to Brian and Irene's house was finally repaired. But just as they settled back into their home, another shock was on the way.
We were going on holiday with our son and his 2 children. We were just taking them up to our caravan and we were going off the island, and I've never seen rain like it. It was horrendous.
And at the first opportunity, we turned round and went back. And within the space of 10 minutes, there were cars abandoned by the side of the road. People had just given up.
Over the next 2.5 hours, a freak storm dumped 1 million cubic metres of water on the island, almost enough to fill Wembley Stadium.
I've never seen rain like it. It was coming off the roof and it was just like a sheet of water down the back.
Like a waterfall, yeah.
Never seen it like it before. It was sheer panic, wasn't it?
The water rose very quickly, frighteningly so.
A month's worth of rain was falling every hour, hitting sun-baked ground and running off the surface.
Brian and my son and myself, we tried to stem the flow round the patio doors with quilts and pillows and cushions, but then it broke the seals and it came in. I don't think I'm stopping any more coming indoors and things, though. Just use what I can. It just happened so quickly. Everything went. The new oven, the new dishwasher, the fridge freezer, the washing machine. It was a terrible shock.
With parts of the island lying below sea level, Canvey relies on a series of drains and pumps to filter surface water safely away. But the monsoon-like rain on that day was so intense the drains couldn't cope, so the water didn't reach 13 of the 15 pumping stations, leading to a catastrophic system failure.
I ran outside, got the pump out, and the lightning struck, and straight away all the power went off. And as soon as the power went off, within 12 minutes, 15 minutes, we had 11 inches in the house. That's how quick it was.
With the water quickly rising, neighbours were concerned for Brian and Irene's safety.
We had friends and neighbours wading through the water to come to our front door. And we had to shout to them from the balcony, "Sorry, we can't open the front door. The water won't allow us to."
Tens of thousands of pounds worth of repairs from the first flood were washed away. Brian and Irene were facing the prospect of leaving their home again, as well as another huge repair bill.
Mum was laying on the bed, given up.
In Braintree, Essex, Owen Allen is under threat in his own home, due to it being slap bang in the middle of a crash zone. 3 years ago, having already been hit 12 times, he built a barrier of concrete bollards in his garden to fortify the house. But even these couldn't protect him against crash number 13.
I heard a bang, and looking through the window, I saw a car impale on the partition wall between me and the next door neighbor. It looked a real carnage because bits of concrete and broken screen wall with bits of his car is spread all over.
Most dangerous of all, the body of the car landed just meters from the storage tank for the oil that heats Owen's home.
This is the bedroom. We're both sleeping in there. This is the wall housing the oil tank behind it. And one of the bollards carried and landed over here.
Remarkably, the driver walked away from the crash without a scratch.
If I didn't put the bollards there, he would have run right in and caused a catastrophic accident with probably death, killing someone, killing us.
Enough was enough for Owen, so he upped the ante with his defences.
1, 2, 3, 4 concrete bollards and a concrete bunker here, which is very, very solid.
As well as his fortifications, Owen has been busy writing to the authorities. He's also sent letters to anyone else he thinks might help, even the Queen.
Her Majesty has taken careful note of your comments regarding the damage to the gating outside your home. I should explain, however, that this is not a matter in which the Queen would personally intervene. I have nevertheless been instructed to send your letter to the Right Honourable Eric Pickles MP, the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. The Committee Secretary returned me to the Department of Transport, and the Department of Transport passed me back to the local council where I started.
Owen's persistence finally paid off, and the council agreed to put measures in place. A spokesperson for Essex County Council said, a request for alterations was approved in June 2014. The scheme provided additional signs and lines to highlight the road alignment and emphasise the requirement to maintain an appropriate speed. But Owen's less than impressed with their traffic calming measures.
All my attempt to get something done, and that is what I ended up with. A chevron, which in the first place I've been put in the wrong place. And I got a slope in the middle of the road.
Owen is determined to stay in his beloved home, bollards and all.
I know they look a little bit ugly, unsightly, but if they look unsightly, I'll have to live with it. At least I'm alive to be able to look at the ugliness.
On Canvey Island in Essex, over just 11 months, Brian and Irene Staines have been hit by not one, but 2 devastating floods.
There's a water line, so level, it was just up to my knees. And it was just like that all over the front, the back, and 2 or 3 roads that way and 2 or 3 roads the other way.
When the second flood finally subsided, it had caused another £60,000 worth of damage, and they were forced to move into temporary accommodation once again.
Everything was brand new. Everything went, the new oven, the new dishwasher, the fridge freezer, the washing machine. It was a terrible shock.
But whilst the weather may have provided the rain for the floods, Brian believes the failure of the pumping system also contributed to the horror, and that it still remains an issue.
This is one of the grills that gets blocked with rubbish. Once that grill gets blocked, then water doesn't get to the pumps. Just a simple action of removing rubbish can save 20 or 30 houses from flooding. I've been writing to the local authorities. I've been writing to our MP. I've been campaigning, certainly since the year 2000, to get something done about the system.
As an elderly man, to have to go down to the seafront with a rake to clear the grates to make sure that this doesn't happen isn't right.
The unprecedented floods of the past 2 years have resulted in an Environment Agency action plan for Canvey Island, which includes improving the performance of the pumps. And the council has also pledged to target draining defects with jet cleaning of drains and a more regular gully cleansing system. 5 months after the second flood swept through their home, Brian and Irene are finally able to return home.
To come back and see it all put back into place, it's lovely. It's a good feeling to come back and see it looking so nice. Well, it's beginning to look like home again, isn't it?
But whilst the damage to the house is patched up, the emotional scars will take longer to heal.
If it happened again, I think we'd just want to walk away.
And leave it.
And not go back.
No.
We'd survive because we are survivors. I don't think I want to go back, you know.
I couldn't go through it again. Twice is enough.